Okay, looks like we're filling up, which is nice. So I think we can kick it off. So you ready,
That
Becky?
sounds good. I am. Let's do it.
Sounds good. Okay, welcome everybody. If you're filtering in, just as I mentioned a second ago, but if you've just come in, please make sure that you have your first name and your last name in the Zoom list. This just helps us send the recording to the right people. If we only have a first name or a number or something, you might not get the recording. And so I just make sure everybody gets that. So please take a second to update your name if possible. We will do our best to send out the recording once this is done with the slides and any materials we talk about here. But
I was
let's
going to say
dive
the bonus materials.
exactly. Just spoiler alert, Becky. All right, cool. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am joined today by Dr. Rebecca Pollock. So, thank you for taking the time. She's going to be controlling the slides. So, Becky, if you want to go to the next slide, and when we send these around, we'll have our contact information in there so you can get a hold of either of us at any time. But a little bit about PeoplePath. So we have many clients on the call today, but we have a lot of potential clients and hopefully people that will join us someday. But a little bit about us. So we are the world's leading global provider of corporate alumni software. We work with some of the best organizations in the world, and I'm a little biased. I used to be a client, and so even more so biased. And so we have a small but mighty team, about 65 people worldwide based in the US and in Germany. We have offices all over the place. And so we're very excited to work with some amazing people and some programs around the world. And we manage millions of talent profiles and alumni across the world, which is really cool to be a part of. Um, what else can I tell you about? Oh, PeoplePath events. We have a lot of things going on in the world. Right now, we're in the middle of a what we call a building a business case webinar. If Becky, you want to go to the next slide? There are a couple of QR codes. So part of that, what we're doing right now is for programs that maybe are brand new or thinking about starting, we're kind of walking people through all the steps to think about. And so we have three parts to this, and we've just launched the part two, which is about utilizing technology. So you can use this QR code to download the guide and, well, this one's about signing up for the webinar, but in the platform I have, or in the chat, I've sent the links to these. And so this is just if you're looking to help make the case to a senior leader to get a corporate alumni program and get a platform and start that process. So we'll do three parts. The next one will come out pretty soon. So we're just excited about that. And then also for everyone on this call, whether you are a PeoplePath client or not, we are running our corporate alumni benchmarking survey. And so this will be open for another few weeks. And so if you haven't taken it yet, this QR code will bring you to that survey. I'll also put the link in the chat. So things are quite busy here at PeoplePath, and we'll have more events in the fall. We usually go to New York and London, and so if you're in those places, we look forward to seeing you. We'll have more webinars. We have a lot planned for this year, so excited to have you a part of this event. And I'll pass it over to Becky to talk about what we're going to be doing today.
And I will just reiterate, please take the survey. It helps with the data. We learned so much from you all through the benchmarking report. So help us make this the best report yet. And excited to see what you all say in the benchmarking report. And so I will dive in. I'm super excited to talk about today's topic. This is nerdy, survey talk. So this is really near and dear to my heart. I've talked to quite a few alumni managers over the years, particularly about alumni surveys. And a lot of this webinar, when Jen and I were thinking about this webinar, was thinking about what are some of the common issues we've seen across alumni surveys? What are some of the best practices that you all are already implementing, and trying to highlight it and put it into a cohesive story for you all to make it valuable for when you're surveying your alumni. So we'll talk about three different components. We'll talk about planning for a survey, designing the actual survey instrument itself, as well as if you don't have the time or the resources to implement a full survey, what are some other options in collecting data? So we'll start with planning for a survey. And before we actually dive into the material, I wanted to do a little bit of a pulse check with you all. So we've got a Mentimeter QR code. Jen is putting the link into the chat as well, so that can make it easier for you, but we're looking to get some feedback on two particular questions. We want to know, has your alumni program conducted an annual or biannual survey within the last 3 years? So get a sense of who's actually conducting these surveys already. Many of you already, are implementing or issuing a survey once every few years already. Some of you maybe are just thinking about how to get started. Hopefully this webinar will have a little bit of everything for everyone. The second question we want to understand is what is or would be, if you haven't issued the survey yet, but what is the top reason for surveying alumni? We recognize there are probably multiple reasons that you're surveying alumni, but we want to try to zero in on what's that top reason, what's that top goal, top reason for surveying alumni. So hopefully everybody's gotten a chance to click into the Mentimeter. I'll give you all a little bit of time here to answer these questions. And Jen, just let me know when you're ready.
Yep, I just took over, I think, the share, so you can start to see some of these results already popping in. And actually, we'll share that QR code here in case you're still signing in. We love our Mentimeters here. We're always a big fan of
They're
getting
always
feedback.
fun. It's always cool to see what comes up.
Yeah, well, it's good to see like what people are working with. And right now, it's a dead heat almost of
Oh, I
people
love
who.
this.
Yeah, this is really cool, actually. Um, Especially when there's a lot of no's, which means there's
Oh,
a room for improvement.
got it 50-50 here. I feel like I'm watching a horse race.
All right. So I think, oh, we'll keep going. 36 out of 40. Wonderful. Wow, I can't believe this is a perfect split. So amazing. Okay, cool. So this gives us a really good insight into who's here and what we're working with. And hopefully for those who haven't run one yet, this will provide a lot of insight into getting you ready for your first one. And we'll move on to the next one. And so really now this is just what is your top reason for surveying alumni or would be if you were going to do a survey? This one feels like more of a horse race because it'll move around as people.
Okay, see, now it's feeling like the horse race here.
Mm. I love good design on polls.
This is really helpful to get a
Yeah.
sense of, what is the reason? And as we're starting to already see, there can be a variety of reasons. So we'll talk about why this is important as we go through the webinar. That's my spoiler alert. Part of this is to help us think through, how to structure the survey itself. Um, well, so this is a really good starting point.
Yeah, and it's curious to see a few people have marked none of the above, which I was curious about. And so if you're one of those people that have marked none of the above, maybe in the chat, if there's a different reason that we didn't list here, it might be good to drop that in there to kind of give us some more insight into, why you might be running a survey. All right, looks to be slowing down a bit. So we have identify areas for improvement. Love that. Gathering alumni feedback, everything, which I'm glad that's kind of up there. Demonstrate the value, tracking change over time, and again, that none. So nice, even kind of breakdown here. So we'll dive more into this. And so, Becky, any other thoughts before I stop sharing?
No, this is really great. I guess what I want to highlight here is, the variety of reasons. So I'll say this throughout the webinar is there's not really a one size fits all best practice approach to conducting these surveys. A lot of it really should be embedded in this idea of what's the goal, what's your top reason for surveying alumni. So I think why I'm highlighting this now is that as we're going through and we're talking about these different reasons to use different tools, always ties back to your reason and your goal for surveying alumni, and just kind of think through that as we're talking about different options, what may be most relevant or most useful for your particular program.
Very cool. All
Yeah,
right, so up and back to you.
yeah, I will restart here. All right, can everybody see the screen back? Okay, cool. All right, so let's dive into it. As mentioned, we're going to talk about how to plan for a survey. So this is before you even get to the survey instrument itself. We want to go through a few things to think about. So, what is the survey goal? Are there other points of data that you can link the survey to? How long should the survey be? Particularly in today's world with AI and advancements in technology, thinking about the restrictions and security of the survey is becoming more and more important. Also, for many of you all operating global alumni programs, you want to think about language and accessibility for different locations. And then Jen will talk a little bit about survey incentives. So we started with doing the Mentimeter for the goals because I cannot stress enough, this really should be the core grounding for your alumni survey. Before you even start putting together questions, you want to think about what are the main goals of the survey? What am I hoping to report out? What am I hoping to learn? For some, it's demonstrating the value of the alumni program. So this may be something like reporting out the data from the survey to executives, to others. For others, it's a little bit more of an internal focus for the alumni program itself. Understanding what it is that the alumni program could do better, how they can improve. And these are going to guide you to different types of questions, and we'll get through that in the webinar. You also want to be thinking about who's the primary audience for the results. So again, this really speaks to, is this going to be something, are you surveying in order to prepare a report for external eyes, for others in the organization? Or are you conducting the survey just for your team to really understand what's going on in the alumni program itself? The next point I want you to think about before even putting together the survey is, can you connect this data to other points of data? A lot of this will be determined by how you're actually issuing the survey. When you issue the survey, are you going to distribute it via an anonymous link or an identifiable link? So the identifiable link would be connected to an ID code or an email, where potentially you can link that data to other points of data. This gets really interesting. This is where I get really nerdy, thinking about, can you connect it to HRIS data? So maybe you're connecting to understand how tenure or where they were in the organization during employment links to some of this survey data. Maybe you're linking it to prior employee surveys while they were employed, looking at engagement and how that facilitates alumni engagement. Maybe you're tying it to exit survey or exit interview data to understand the reasons why they left and what they're using or what they find most valuable or how they feel in that survey. The other really cool thing that we've started exploring is looking at how to tie the alumni survey data to alumni platform activity, again, to just tell a fuller, more rich story about your alumni. I think a big question that always comes up is, how long should it be? You always want to aim for about 10 minutes or less. And honestly, this is really equates to about 25 to 30 questions. I know Jen and I, whenever we're preparing surveys, we want to ask all of the questions. So this is really the difficult part where, you'll come up with a bunch of different things you want to ask about and then have to filter it down to really fit into this 10 minutes, to equate it to about 10 minutes of taking the survey. What we found through research is that when it gets to about the 8-minute mark or more, we start to see completion rates drop. So it can drop anywhere from 5 to 20%. Here you're seeing in this chart the amount of questions and how long it should participant expects it will take the participant to take the survey. This is really important to think about when you're crafting that survey instrument because you really want to make sure those highest priority questions, the ones that are the main goal of the survey, are at the beginning of the survey, right? So if it ends up becoming longer and people drop out along the way, you want to make sure your most important questions are right at the beginning of the survey. Uh, Today, everybody's taking survey on different instruments, different methods. So a question you may want to think about is, do you want to restrict how alumni take your survey? Should they be able to take it on their phone or their tablet? I've heard stories where people are at the gym on the treadmill taking their survey on their phone. So sometimes that can hurt the quality of the data. So that may be something you want to think about. Do you want alumni to only take the survey on a computer so they're being thoughtful about their answers? If you are opening it up, which is totally fine, especially for shorter surveys, just make sure that you're thinking about, if somebody's taking this on their phone, can they see the full set of questions? Is it easily readable? Making sure there's the accessibility in that sense. The other thing to think about is whether or not the types of questions included on the survey are more or less difficult to respond to. So, of course, open-ended responses are a lot more difficult to respond to when you're doing it on your phone versus on a computer. As I kind of alluded to at the beginning, we're seeing more and more difficulty with online surveys in terms of the advancements of technology and AI. We're seeing more bots, for example. So survey security and placing restrictions and limiting access is becoming more and more important, or making sure you've got these security components in place to reduce bot responses or to reduce replication of responses. CAPTCHA is kind of the gold standard of what we expect. Make sure you have a CAPTCHA at the beginning of your survey to weed out any of those bots. If you're able to use Qualtrics, they're putting in a ton of different measures to really reduce the likelihood of bots responding to surveys. So I definitely recommend that. It's in the security portions of the survey setup. So that's, again, I want you to give tips that just help you think through how to improve the quality of your survey data. One other thing that I do whenever I'm looking at surveys is after the survey is completed, I look through the timing. A lot of different survey platforms will show you how long it took the person to complete the survey. If it's a 10-minute survey and they're completing it in about a minute or less, you may have questions about the quality of the data, and then can decide whether or not to include that in your overall reporting. So these are just some tips to really think through how to protect the survey and make sure you're implementing security components to get the best data. All right, many of you are operating global alumni programs. So does your survey need translations? And if so, how will you implement that? Will you allow different features of accessibility in terms of allowing participants to save it, go do something else and return? I know many of your alumni are, handling busy workloads, so sometimes they won't get to complete the survey all in one sitting. Generally, you can do that with an identifiable link so that the system itself knows who's coming back to it. You also want to think about other components of accessibility. So is it readable? Make sure that your surveys have dark text on a light background that makes it more easily readable for many participants. Don't rely on color to convey any type of meaning within your survey. So make sure that the text isn't kind of color coded. It's all dark text throughout the survey. Make sure that the font size is readable. And then the one thing that a lot of people don't think about is screen reader compatibility. So making sure that the font can actually be read out loud for anybody who uses those types of supports. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about survey incentives, and I will hand it over to Jen for this.
Sure. Thank you. I get this question a lot. And so it's how do you just get those response rates up? That is not unique to alumni programs. It is very much any survey online. But we have to consider why do people take surveys? And so, one, sometimes people just want to be helpful. Maybe they do just really enjoy the topic. They're very passionate about it. And especially in an alumni program, I think that really is the case. And then there's always the tangible benefit. So thinking about that incentive, a prize, a reward, some kind of thing. And so if you go to the next slide, Becky talks about what the options are for that. And so everything I read before this, just to kind of do a little bit of research, was basically saying that cash is king. If someone gets $5, they love that. However, you do want to think about the audience and if it's valuable to them. Is $5 really worth it? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they're doctors, lawyers, things like that. They don't necessarily need $5. So maybe donating $10 to a nonprofit seems more impactful than them getting the money amount there. So you want to think about that target population. And then we see a lot of non-monetary. So it may not be as impactful on a response rate as direct cash, but it's still very good. And so thinking about physical items or even discounts to conferences, events, things like that are very good to offer. We've seen things like offering a case of champagne. So maybe not everyone gets this case of champagne, but you enter a raffle almost to win. And so that kind of brings us to the two other ways, which is a prepaid versus promised. The research shows that a prepaid option is by far and away the more impactful for response rates, meaning that you get something before you even complete it. The execution of this is very difficult in everything I read. And so, more often than not, you see promise. So, by the time you complete the survey, you will get $10 gift certificate. And so, it works just as well. And then there's these sweepstakes versus kind of a raffle or individual. So, it's really thinking about your budget. So, if you have $500 and you want to give that to one person via sweepstakes, then you could do that raffle kind of contest rules, or you could do an individual. Maybe everyone gets $2 of that 500. So however you want to execute it is fine. There's no real hard concrete evidence that I could find that talks about one being better than the other. But both do rise with response rates. So all of these things do help with the response rate overall. And so whichever way you want, however your budget allows for, typically impacts and helps your survey. So that's it. Back to you.
All right. Hopefully, we've given you a lot to think about already just in planning the survey. And now we can get a little bit more into the meat, really thinking about what should the actual instrument look like. This is in this next section, we're going to talk about developing the survey items and what that survey should actually look like once it's presented to your alumni. I wanted to start off even before getting into the questions themselves. Make sure that you're thinking about the introduction to the survey. What is it that alumni will first see as they're clicking through the survey? Make sure, let me go to, make sure you're explaining the purpose of the survey. So what is it that you're hoping to collect from them through the survey? You want to give a little bit of guidance in terms of informing users how many questions they might see or how long the survey is expected to take. You also want to provide some reassurances about confidentiality. So please assure them that their responses are confidential. Generally, I think for most of you all, any responses would be anonymized or any specific comments would not be shared with people in the organization. Or at least responses would not be identifiable when you share them back with people in the organization. And then you also want to provide information about whether or not participants can pause and later return. Okay, so this should all be in that opening page when alumni first click on the survey to give them a sense of what it is that they'll be seeing and reassuring them about the confidentiality of their responses. All right, let's get into the framing of the questions. This is the part I'm getting the most excited about. Again, I think there are a variety of different ways to ask questions, but a lot of the questions that I've seen can unintentionally bias your alumni in the ways that they respond. So I want to highlight some of these issues that can come up so that you're thinking about them when you're developing your own alumni survey. I mentioned that we were going to come back to the goal of the survey and the goal of the question. This really roots the development of your questions. So we really want to think about the alignment between the goal of the survey, the goal of the question, and the way the question is actually worded. I can't stress enough that the way the question is worded can really bias the ways that alumni respond, as well as the data that you then collect and ultimately report out. So the first point I want to make is thinking about how the question is worded in a positive versus negative frame. Both have their benefits, both have their values. So we talked about survey goals, and many of you did mention that you're looking to identify areas of improvement or ways to make your alumni program better. Generally, those are going to come in, the questions are going to be structured in a more negative way, trying to identify those areas of improvement or assess weaknesses in the program. More positively framed questions, the goal of these are generally to demonstrate the value of the alumni program itself or identify the things that are working well. So again, just to kind of mention, positive framed questions are really good at identifying strengths of the program or aspects of the program. They help you understand how to guide your investments. These are the things that are already working well. We need to dedicate more time and resources to these aspects, or this is where we want to build on because it's already going well. The negative framed questions are really good for diagnosing those problems, identifying barriers to alumni engagement, or understanding where there's dissatisfaction. I want to make sure this is stressed and that you understand both have their strengths. One isn't necessarily better than the other. I just want you to be thinking about the type of response that you're inviting based on the way the question is framed or set up. So just to kind of help make this a little bit more tangible or help with the understanding of positive versus negative framed questions, here's an example of a positive framed question. So they're asked to rate the extent to which you agree with the following statements, and they're provided the response scale. And then they're asked to agree or disagree with, I'm motivated to be a part of your particular company's alumni network because I want to make networking connections to enhance my job, access information or resources, develop opportunities that will support my job, explore potential employment opportunities. So these all are kind of positive aspects of an alumni's motivation, reasons for engaging. Here are some examples of negative framed questions. Please list the top 3 reasons you left the organization. I wanted higher compensation. I wasn't happy with my work-life balance. I wanted better training and development opportunities. Or I don't find the alumni website valuable because I wasn't aware there was an alumni website. I don't need to use an alumni website, or I obtained the benefits from a different website. So the reason I'm reading these out is because you can imagine once you're reporting this out, imagine you're creating this report, and with the questions on the left, you can say, you know, our alumni are engaged because they want to network, they want information, they want resources. It's a very positive framed response. If you're reporting out on these negative framed questions, then you're saying our alumni weren't happy because they wanted higher compensation. They weren't happy because they didn't need to use the alumni website. And you can imagine how an external reader, when you're reporting this out, may interpret those differently. And it's all just, they're basically getting to kind of the same idea, but it's all just in the way the question is worded. Okay. The second point I want you to think about as you're constructing these questions is thinking about whether you're asking about sentiments or alumni reactions versus behaviors. And again, they both have their purpose, but just careful wording tweaks and being thoughtful about how it's being asked can help you better understand what you're targeting. Oftentimes, we're looking at sentiments or reactions to understand reactions over time, or reactions are a really great way to measure comparisons. So you could measure alumni opinions versus employee opinions, or alumni opinions compared to another alumni program's opinions. Behaviors are a little bit more direct. You're generally looking to collect information about the value that alumni are providing back. So this really helps demonstrate the value of the alumni program or understand future ways that alumni may be interested in giving back. I will note they are highly correlated. So if you are short on time, you can make inferences from the sentiments or reactions about behaviors. So we generally think about sentiments and reactions leading to behaviors. So you would expect those to be highly correlated. Again, just to help solidify what we're talking about here, I think examples are quite helpful. So here's an example of a question framed around sentiment or reactions. Organizational identification is a very common scale that we use in academic research, but you can see here these items. I felt like I was part of the family, or I felt emotionally attached to that particular organization. The organization had a great deal of personal meaning for me. These are all sentiments, reactions. It's not constrained by the alum's resources or time. It's just about how they feel about the organization. And then you have some examples from the behavioral side. So here we're asking, how often do you do any of the following activities? Proactively take part in the formal programming, connect with current employees, interact with alumni outside of the formal programming. These are actual behaviors, so they may be constrained by the alum's time or resources, but it doesn't mean they don't feel positively about the organization, right? So when you're asking about actual behaviors, you may see lower levels because of those extra constraints, whereas the sentiments are getting at their actual feelings about the organization. However, a lot of the times when you're reporting up to the C-suite, and you report sentiments or reactions, the response is, so what? Okay, they feel positively, but then what? How are they actually implementing or actively demonstrating these feelings? And that's where the behaviors portion comes in. So at the bottom, you see there is no really best practice about it. You want to ask, hopefully, if you have space in your survey, you want to ask about both reactions and behaviors. And then the last one I want you to think about is thinking about whether you're asking about past versus future behaviors. So taking that behavior component from the last section, are you asking about things that have already happened? This is really great for demonstrating that value, but also capturing behaviors that you can't capture through the formal alumni program. We all know people are connecting outside of the program, that they're just different ways that they contribute back that you can't always track through formal programming. The alumni survey is a great way to try to dig into what have they already done that maybe we just weren't tracking. Future can also help demonstrate the value of the alumni program, as well as think about new opportunities that maybe you haven't even thought about that they're interested in giving back in the future. I'm going to skip these. I covered the specific reasons for both the past and the future, the differences of why you would want to ask past framed questions versus future framed questions. And here are the examples that will maybe make this a little bit more solidified. So in the past 12 months, this is one we do encourage you ask. Frame it around the past 12 months to really contain the period that you're asking about. Have you helped broker new business-to-business partnerships? Have you contributed or participated in these business-to-business relationships? Have you shared insights? This is a really good one that's really hard to capture in any other way. Have you applied to be rehired in the past 12 months? You can then do these also future-focused. And again, excuse me, this is capturing a different set of responses. What are people hoping to do in the future? This is one that we really structure around the Net Promoter Score items. So how likely is it that you would recommend the services of the organization to a friend or a colleague in the future? How likely is it that you would recommend the organization as a place to work? Or how likely is it that you would recommend the organization's alumni network to other alumni? And these are really those net promoter scores, capturing kind of intentions, but really getting a sense of how strong the relationship with the organization is. All right, so just to summarize the question framing, I really want you to think about, how are your questions framed? Do they invite positive versus negative responses? Are you asking about reactions versus behaviors? And are you looking to collect information about what alumni have done in the past? Or are you trying to plan for the future and understand what are future intentions to support the organization? There's no right or best answer. Generally, it's a mix of some of these, but the key is to be intentional, to think about what are the goals of that survey and how am I structuring these questions in order to align with the goals and the intent of the survey. I can't talk about, oops, I can't talk about the framing of the questions without getting to responses. Jen, did you want to pop in?
Just that if there's any questions about any of those examples, about the way to frame, we definitely have time to go through it. So if you can pop them in the chat if you want to. Just before we head into measuring, I just want to make sure we paused and took a second to see if there were any questions out there. Doesn't look like there are, so go ahead.
And
Oh,
feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll take questions throughout as well. I know some of this is a lot to absorb, so I'm happy to pause in between to add information or insight.
one did come in, says from the NPS score aspect, should we do 1 to 10? And so it's kind of perfect going into the measuring. So go, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is perfect. I definitely recommend for those NPS scores to do the full 1 to 10 to stick within those guidelines. They've also done quite a bit of research to show the 9 and 10s are your top promoters. So definitely, that's a really great question for those net promoter scores using the 1 to 10. And as Jen mentioned, that's a perfect lead in as well to this next set of questions. Was there another question before I dive in? Okay. All right. So the second part of it, right, is we've talked about how to frame the questions, but the second part of it is, well, what kinds of ways am I guiding the responses from alumni? There's a few different options. One is the main consideration is whether or not you want to do a dichotomous scale versus a Likert scale. The dichotomous scale is going to be just the two response options. So really great example of this is, would you recommend the alumni program to others? Yes or no. Other options may be something like, is this fair or unfair? Do you agree or disagree? Is this statement true or false? For the Likert scale, there are a variety of different ways to do the Likert scale or Likert scale, depending how your preference for pronouncing it. One way that is introduced or that has been used in the past is when you do a Likert scale that's just simply 1 to 5. So how likely are you to recommend the alumni program to others? 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, ideally 1 to 10 for this kind of question. Versus a Likert scale that's anchored. So this really gives an exact, it helps alumni understand exactly how they're responding. So is it extremely unlikely, unlikely, neutral, likely, extremely likely? Generally, when you're using a Likert scale, I highly recommend you include those anchoring options for whatever it is that you're asking. It really helps make the responses consistent, right? You can imagine when it's just 1 through 5 and there's not much guidance about what a 3 is versus a 5, and you've got a lot of different alumni taking your survey, there's no consistency on what those numbers mean. It can be interpreted differently by different alumni. So by providing those anchors, you're really helping alumni understand and getting a more consistent set of data that you can then analyze and interpret. I want you to think about the ways that you may report based off of how you're presenting these response options. If it's a dichotomous scale, you're generally reporting out in percentages. So 40% say yes and 60% say no. It's quite difficult to really dig into that to get a more a fuller picture of what's going on when it's dichotomous. We generally do encourage Likert scales that are anchored. In this case, you could do an average, the mean or the median, in order to get a better understanding of how your alumni are feeling or behaving. You can do things, for example, the NPS score, where you have the 1 through 10, and you can say 80% of our alumni are in the promoter, the strong promoter category, because 80% put a 9 or a 10, right? So you can actually, one of the benefits of the Likert scale is you can dichotomize and report percentages if you select certain items. And so you just have a lot more options when you're using a Likert scale. As mentioned and as a preview, we will be providing additional resources after the webinar. The resources will include an overview of everything we've talked about in this webinar, but we're also going to include some links to really good, strong resources that provide more information. Particularly, they give a variety of different ways to use the Likert scale. So the range of anchoring from satisfaction to dissatisfaction or agreement to disagreement. I use these all of the time because I'm using different questions and I'm like, what does that look like on a 10-point scale? What does that look like on a 7-point scale? And so these resources will provide those so you don't have to kind of think through them and you're using standardized responses. It also includes information about how to write clear STEM questions. And another question that I get quite often is, if I'm using a Likert scale, should I use odd versus even responses? Generally, we use odd 5 or 7 responses because it allows people, if they don't have a strong feeling one way or the other, it allows that neutrality. If you're really trying to force an opinion, then the even set of responses is encouraged. There are a variety of different other information and resources in these links, so hopefully it can address questions that maybe we haven't been able to address in this webinar. Another question that I get quite often is, should we include open-ended responses? And there are positives and pros and cons to open-ended responses. Of course, with open-ended responses, you get more depth, you get more insight from your alumni. They can also help you uncover new ideas, things that you maybe hadn't even thought about implementing in your alumni program. So that can be a really great resource. But on the flip side, they can make that survey a little bit longer for those respondents, makes taking the survey itself a little bit more taxing. And then on your end, it's a little bit more difficult to analyze, right? Instead of just being able to aggregate and create a number for a question, you have to read through all of the responses. We do have tools now that help make that analysis a little bit more quick. We can use AI to help analyze qualitative responses and to identify themes and patterns in the responses. But again, that is a little bit more technical and is a little bit more difficult. If you are using open-ended, open-ended responses, there are some ways to implement them in ways that will actually improve the quality of data. So it's highly recommended that if you're using an open-ended response, you would want to pair it with a multiple choice question. So these are the situations where you've got, how likely is it that you would recommend the alumni program, rate that from 1 to 10, and then you can use the open-ended box to ask alumni to explain why they responded the way they did. This can also be used in an effective manner if you've got a list of responses and you include an open-ended box that asks, is there anything that you would have included that we haven't already included there? In this way, the multiple choice question or the quantitative question guides alumni in their response so they know specifically what they should be responding to. Make sure that if you're using an open-ended response, you're keeping the prompts focused. Try to avoid overuse of the open-ended responses. Again, the more open-ended responses you include, the longer it is for alumni to take the survey. And if you're including those open-ended responses, don't make it mandatory to respond to. Make sure your alumni have a way to not respond and continue to move through the survey. All right. So we know that not everybody can issue a full comprehensive survey. So Jen is going to talk about some other options in case you don't have that time and resource.
Yeah, if you don't have access to Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey and don't want to do a full 30 question type survey, there are easier ways to just kind of get an idea or a pulse every so often. So if you're a PeoplePath client or using another service, we have a polling feature in our platform. These screenshots are just an example of what's in our demo platform. But essentially, you can just ask these questions like the positive question, negative question, the NPS questions. You can ask them in the platform and put it right there on the front page. And you could do this every quarter, every month, and you can see the responses right away. So this example on the screen is just what type of events do you prefer attending? Easy way to get some quick feedback. And you can have them select and you see the responses right away. So in this case, it's a dead heat of they want to see all these events, but you could ask any question in a variety of ways. I believe it's up to 2 or 3 questions at a time in our particular polling feature. But it's a great way to, even if you just do it once a year, how likely are you to refer someone to the alumni program? Just getting that little bit of data in the platform once, twice, 3 times a year gives you enough to start to create a report. And it doesn't involve a full, 6-week promotion and getting the answers and then analyzing the answers and then sharing all that out. It's really easy just to kind of do 1 or 2 quick questions. You can do free text, multi-answer picks, multiple choice, but it's a great way just to easily get that information pretty quickly. So if the big survey was overwhelming, hopefully there's these other options.
Yeah, I highly recommend that also, even if you are doing the annual or biannual survey, those are really great ways to check in throughout the years. If you're doing a biannual survey and you want to do those pulse checks in between, I think that's a great way to collect additional data. We're going to ask for questions, so I'm going to prep you for that, but I do want to close with a few final thoughts. I hope that from this webinar, the takeaway is that there's no best way. There's no best set of questions for all alumni programs. There are certain questions that are really great to use if you're trying to benchmark across alumni programs. But what I'm hoping that this webinar encourages you to think about is the intentionality of the questions and the responses that you're including in the survey. Again, it always connects back to that overarching goal of the survey and what is the goal of each particular question. And at that, I hope this was helpful for many of you, and I want to open up the floor for any questions or things that maybe weren't clear.
Yeah, we did have one come in. So questions in the platform. The target audience is already quite segmented as it's only people who are logging in. And so any thoughts or advice. And so what you're getting at is that people have registered for the program or in the platform, and then those who are coming in for whatever reason. So it's a segment of a segment, right? And largely that's the case. And so most of the time when you run surveys, you have to have legal buy-in for these things, who you're reaching out to. And so most of the time you are sending a survey only to those who have registered because they've opted in. So not all surveys get 100% of alumni. Some companies, especially in the US, might be able to do all, and that's great. So it's kind of balancing those segments, and a little bit of data is still better than no data, in my opinion. Becky, would you agree?
100%. And I think whenever I report out these kinds of surveys, we always include the response rate just to provide that information and to contextualize that this isn't the full sentiment of alumni. It's 17% of alumni or 40% of alumni.
Yeah. And that's usually indicative of a larger amount, right? So it's just enough to say that you have something to go off of, and that's why you're making the decisions you're making. So you're never going to get 100%, but the more you can, the better.
anybody figures that out, I think all of the researchers would love that secret.
Exactly. Let's see. So if the survey lives outside the platform, like Qualtrics, how do you use it to drive user engagement in the platform, or should it not be leveraged that way? This is I'd say typical marketing, right? So you always have links outside of a platform, and so everything should be brought into the platform. But this is one of those things where you want to put it in every place possible. You want to put in emails, you want to put on the platform, you want to put it on LinkedIn, you want to put it on pages and groups within LinkedIn, and every other way to share widely. We're even doing this for the survey now, right? So we do this I reach out individually to people on LinkedIn that I've never met saying, hey, like, I see you have anything to do with the corporate alumni program. Would you want to take a survey? So it's largely just marketing promotional principles when it comes to promoting that link. But yeah, I'd say if anyone has really great ideas on how to share promoting LinkedIn surveys, we'd all be interested to hear that. So that's how I think about that. Let's see, what else? Lots of questions. I love this. When asking a question in the portal, do the members get an alert to visit the portal to respond? Um, Largely that's how you set up your platform, right? So whatever your communication plans are, however you normally communicate within the platform. I know if you have the mobile app, there are push notifications, but if you don't have the mobile app, there's no push notifications. So I would say largely if you're running a survey and you're using either Qualtrics or some outside thing or the polling feature, just chat with your CSM and just exactly how that's working for your particular program. And then let's see, what's considered a minimum good and high response rate for a global survey? What do you think, Becky?
I think this varies by the alumni program. The larger the alumni network is, the lower the response rate will be just because of sheer numbers. Generally, though, I have seen anywhere from the low teens, so 14, 15% up to 40%. A lot of this will, again, depend on both the size of the alumni network. It will also depend on the incentives, the communication strategy on how you're launching and making alumni aware of the survey. So it can vary quite a bit, but I would say at the very high end, I think the highest I've ever seen is about 40%.
Yeah, I know when we did this years ago, when I was running Oliver Wyman's program, our response rates without incentives were around 10%. And then when we did include incentives, it was usually around 15 to 20%. So it really did make a big difference in adding that. So anything you can do to promote and get people involved and share incentives really does help that response rate grow. How long would you keep the survey open? Also a great question. I know for our benchmarking survey, we start promoting. This year we did it, I think it was the first week of February is when we started, I think, Becky, and we're keeping it
Yes.
hopefully till about the end of March. So I recommend about 6 to 8 weeks. That may be different across the board, but we do it for our webinars, we do it for survey responses because it takes that long to do all of that marketing, right? It takes that time to set up the emails, to do the reminders, to include in other events that are happening, to get multiple social media posts, to do all the individual outreach. It is a project. And so that's why when somebody does these every other year, I completely understand because how much work that goes into promoting this. But the longer
Mhm.
you keep it open and the more you can have individual touch points on surveys, the better. And so if you have something open for 4 weeks, that's fine too. You just might have a better response rate over time.
Yeah, I love this question as well because I think giving at least a month is necessary just to make sure that you have kind of your launch point, a midpoint, and then your end point, and having communication strategies for each of those points. We always see a bump. We have the launch. Midway through, we have the reminder, it's been open for 2 weeks. Please make sure you take it. And then a few days before the closing of the survey, you'd give that final reminder, last chance to take the survey. And then we see another kind of wave of responses coming in. And I know this wasn't asked, but I do want to Jen's point, note that it does take a lot of time and resources. So, if you're keeping your survey open for 6 to 8 weeks, and then you have another 4 to 6 weeks of the analysis component, another 4 to 6 weeks of the reporting, you're really getting a sense of how long it does take to fully complete and report out on these surveys.
Yeah, and that's another reason why those simple touch point polling options every month or quarter sometimes is easier to get a singular data point quicker. And so using them in conjunction is best. But it does take, I'd say, a great survey with really solid insights does take a minimum of 3 to 4 months. And that's
Hmm.
probably conservative.
Yep,
So, but worth it in the
I
end because
agree.
you get a lot of really great data.
100%.
Yeah. And so I'm seeing a couple of comments of keeping it open only for a few weeks. If you think about it only from a how do we all interact on the internet kind of mentality, think about how much you're barraged with every single day. Like I know in my personal email inbox, I have hundreds of unread messages, right? So it's just things you're not necessarily getting. So it's thinking about all of the different places we exist online, how fast things are moving. We easily forget about stuff and how long it takes to get in front of somebody's uh, face to get them to do something. There's like a principle basically that says that somebody needs to see something 6 to 9 times before they even realize that it's a thing. And that can be kind of direct or indirect, but essentially the more you can promote over a longer period of time, the better that response rate should be.
And I think the other thing just to add in there is the timing. So we generally see lower rates in the summer when people are taking time off. And if you only have it open for a week or two, you may catch somebody during their vacation period and then miss them completely. So maybe somebody has a tight deadline and they're not even thinking about an alumni survey. They just need to get past the next week or two. So keeping it open longer does allow for that flexibility in people's lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, we even see it. I get a barrage of out of offices. It's like, oh, I'm on vacation this week. And it can be any time
Yeah.
of year when that happens. They're just allowing for that type of behavior, especially for professionals, right? So we're
Yeah.
all conferences, offsites, all those things that we're all now running around the world to do.
Hmm.
Yeah. Don't think there's any other questions. We have a couple of minutes if there's any last burning thing. Ah, here we go. Let's see. You mentioned Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey a lot. What are others or some to avoid? We are considering Microsoft slash MS Forms.
To be honest, I haven't used Microsoft or MS Forms. Only other one that comes to mind with this is the Google Forms, and those are that's great. It doesn't necessarily have all of the security and the protections that, as well as kind of translation options. So those are just things I would mention in terms of what's the best for your purposes. Do you need a lot of extra security, extra support? In the development of the survey. Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey offer a whole package of different security options. Some of these other free ones are not, as comprehensive.
Yeah, we use Qualtrics for our survey because you run that through UBC. Internally at PeoplePath, we use Microsoft Forms, and the nice thing is it actually calculates the NPS for you right up at top for the way you've done it. But it's an internal use, so we don't use it externally. Probably could, but yeah, I think the security is, especially if you're at a law firm, most people would probably want to be a bit more careful about the tools they're using. So it's really just up to personal, professional requirements.
And I will
Um,
just add then that second note of we are seeing just broadly more bots, more of those kind of non-human responses. And so that's one of the reasons that Qualtrics has really been identified as this gold standard.
And that's a good point too. We remember a few years ago with the benchmarking survey, we offered a $10 cash option, and you and I got barraged with bots looking for that $10. So that's part of the reason why we switched it to nonprofit, because it was easier to control the money aspect on the end. So thinking about execution and bots these days is definitely something to consider. Okay, well, we're at time. We will send the slides, the recording, the additional resources, but thank you for your questions and your time. Hopefully, this was helpful. If you ever have questions about your survey, Becky and I are both available, and we'd love to dig into this stuff clearly. So if you need it,
Absolutely.
let us know. So thank you, Becky, for all of your time and insights here, and I appreciate everybody. And have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.